I never set out to be a K-9 officer. My path in law enforcement began quietly, in traffic division, where I was content pulling over speeders and writing tickets. Routine patrols, straightforward investigations. That was my world. But that all changed one fateful night, in 2008. I had always respected the K-9 unit, admired it from a distance, but I never thought I'd become part of it. Then, on a crisp autumn evening, I watched a K-9 officer and his German Shepherd partner track down a suspect during a high-speed manhunt. The precision of their movements, the unspoken communication between handler and dog, was mesmerizing. The way they worked as one unit, anticipating each other's moves, it sparked something deep inside me. It was that moment that forever altered my trajectory in law enforcement. By the time I found myself at the helm of a K-9 unit, partnered with Zeus, a German Shepherd of incredible skill, I had already experienced a world of adrenaline and danger. But the true test of our bond would come in the abandoned halls of St. Michael's Hospital. St. Michael's was a giant. Towering over the east side of downtown, it was a brutalist monolith, built in 1962, that had served its community for decades before its closure in early 2023. There were whispers about the hospital, the strange disappearances, the unexplained deaths, and the horrific rumors of experiments that were conducted in the psychiatric ward back in the 1970s. I always dismissed these stories as urban legends, but as Zeus and I stood in front of the darkened hospital late one cold September night, those stories began to feel all too real. The fog from the river thickened as we approached the emergency entrance of St. Michael's. It was a typical night shift, uneventful at first, but everything changed when we got the call. Security had spotted movement on the third floor, specifically the old psychiatric unit. Zeus had been through hundreds of searches before, empty buildings, abandoned houses, and remote properties. He was always calm and focused, never showing hesitation. But tonight was different. As we neared the hospital, I noticed something off. A strange aura seemed to hang over the building, as if it were alive and breathing, waiting for us. The air was thick with tension, and the usually fearless Zeus, my loyal companion of 8 years, began to act strangely. His body, once alert and ready, stiffened. His ears flattened against his skull, and his tail tucked between his legs. "Zeus, get in," I commanded, expecting him to follow our well-practiced routine. But to my shock, he backed away, whimpering softly. In all my years as a K-9 officer, I had never seen Zeus refuse a command. Not once. This wasn't hesitation. This was fear. I tried again. "Zeus, in," but he refused, his growls growing louder, his body quivering. It was as though he was sensing something that I couldn't. Something wasn't right. A feeling of dread washed over me. I keyed my radio, calling for backup from another K-9 unit. Officer Williams and his Belgian Malinois, Rex, were the closest, and I didn't want to proceed without another pair of trained eyes and paws. As we waited, the fog grew thicker, swallowing the surroundings. The only sounds were the distant calls from the other officers, muffled by the eerie silence of the night. Frank, the hospital's longtime security guard, had been waiting by the emergency entrance. There was something about his demeanor that felt off. "You sure you want to go in there tonight?" Frank asked, his voice shaking as he unlocked the heavy door to the building. "Been hearing things. Strange things." I chalked it up to the usual anxiety of working in an abandoned place, but Frank's words stuck with me. "Just protocol, Frank. We'll be in and out before you know it," I assured him, trying to brush off his concerns. But as I motioned Zeus forward again, his resistance became harder to ignore. That was when I saw it. The same change in Rex, Officer Williams's dog. Rex, usually stoic and steadfast, was now trembling violently at the doorway. His handler, Officer Williams, crouched down to speak to him. "Something's wrong," he said, his voice low, a rare unease slipping into his tone. "These dogs don't get scared like this." At that moment, I knew this wasn't just another routine check of an old hospital building. Something far beyond the physical world seemed to be at play. And as the silence stretched, I felt the weight of it pressing against me, against my instincts. Minutes felt like hours as we waited for tactical support. The air was thick with tension, and Zeus's whimpers only deepened the sense of something malevolent lurking inside. This wasn't a simple trespasser or urban explorer. This felt like a confrontation with something much darker. The hospital's history, its faded walls, and its haunted past seemed to come alive in the thick fog. Something, or someone, was waiting for us inside. Would we be prepared for whatever was lurking within? Would Zeus and I make it through this night? Only time would tell, but one thing was clear. This was no ordinary mission, and it would change everything we thought we knew about our work. The haunted hallways of St. Michael's Hospital. The atmosphere outside St. Michael's Hospital felt different now. The oppressive fog, thick and clinging to everything, swallowed the streetlights, making the world seem dimmer, like we were on the edge of some forgotten nightmare. Zeus stood by my side, still trembling, his usual poise and alertness replaced by a palpable fear that was beginning to unsettle me. I tried to push it aside. He was a trained, experienced K9, capable of handling anything that came our way. Gunshots, fires, floods, nothing fazed him. But tonight, something was off. Something was deeply wrong. We'd handled calls like this before, abandoned buildings, trespassers. But tonight, it wasn't the usual suspects we were dealing with. It wasn't the scent of old buildings, or even the leftover remnants of trash and alcohol from past intruders. It was something deeper, something ancient. A part of me wanted to turn back, to listen to that nagging voice in my head that screamed, "Get out." But duty, and the job I had committed myself to, didn't allow for hesitation. As the tactical team arrived, the feeling of dread intensified. Officer Williams, Rex's handler, gave me a serious look as we prepared to enter. The others were getting ready too. They didn't feel it. Not yet. But they would. With a curt nod from Lieutenant Rodriguez, the order was given. The door swung open with a creak that sent a shiver down my spine, the darkness beyond swallowed by the thick fog. The hospital loomed before us, a giant, silent sentinel of something forgotten. I tightened my grip on Zeus's leash, and with one last glance at Frank, the security guard who had started to retreat, I stepped inside. Immediately, I felt it, the heavy air. The silence was suffocating, the kind that settled in your chest and made your heartbeat sound louder than it ever had. The sound of our boots echoing on the cold tile floor was the only noise breaking the silence. Zeus, normally so brave, hesitated, his body stiffening with every step. His eyes scanned the darkened hallways, every corner a mystery, every shadow hiding a secret. I could see the fear reflected in his eyes. "Zeus, heal," I whispered, trying to steady my own nerves as we made our way down the dim corridor, our flashlight beams cutting through the gloom. The building seemed to stretch forever, the hallway endless and winding. Doors to patient rooms were left ajar, revealing abandoned beds and medical equipment left to rot in the stillness of time. It was like walking through a forgotten world, like it had been frozen in the past, waiting for us to uncover whatever secrets it held. We reached the third floor, where the psychiatric unit was located. The sound of our movements seemed too loud, almost too disruptive in the unnatural quiet of the place. That was when I heard it, the soft scrape of something shifting in the dark. My heart skipped a beat. "Did you hear that?" I asked Officer Williams, but he was already signaling to the others. He too had noticed the unnatural sounds, the subtle movement behind closed doors. We stopped in front of the main entrance to the old psychiatric ward. My flashlight beam danced over the dust and grime, illuminating the worn signs and the broken doors. Then something extraordinary happened. The air changed. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath mist in front of me. It felt like the building itself was breathing with us, responding to our presence, inviting us deeper into its haunted halls. Zeus's breathing had become rapid, labored, as though he was sensing something I couldn't. His paws scraped against the cold tiles as he hesitated, unwilling to enter. For the first time in years, I wasn't sure what to do. I could feel the tension growing in the air. This wasn't just fear. This was primal instinct. Something was terribly wrong. It wasn't just the fear in Zeus's eyes. It was the unease in the air, the tension that seemed to vibrate in the walls of this long-abandoned place. And then it hit me. It wasn't just the dog who was scared. We were all afraid. I crouched down next to Zeus, trying to calm him, but before I could get a firm grip on the situation, I heard it. Voices. Soft, at first. A murmur barely above a whisper. The sound of hushed conversations behind the walls, like something, or someone, was waiting for us. Waiting in the dark. "Did you hear that?" Officer Williams asked, his hand resting on his weapon. His dog, Rex, was in full alert, his hackles raised, body trembling. "Yes," I said quietly. "Something's here." It was then that I realized. This was no longer a routine search. We had ventured into something far darker than any of us could have anticipated. What was happening here was far more than just a simple trespassing call. It was like we had stumbled into the heart of something sinister, something that had been hidden away for years. "Zeus," I called again, but the dog refused to move. He kept backing away from the door, his tail tucked, whimpering. I couldn't explain it, but I knew he wasn't just scared. He was terrified. And that made me terrified too. Before I could react further, the radio crackled, a voice breaking through the static. "Contact! Contact!" Sergeant Miller's voice shouted, his words strained, filled with panic. Movement on stairwell B, multiple subjects. We rushed to follow the sound of Miller's voice, the dread creeping up my spine with every step. What had we walked into? What was in those shadows that was so powerful, so unnerving, that not even our most seasoned K9s could face it? The answers, I was certain, would come soon. But I wasn't prepared for the truth. None of us were. The dark secrets of St. Michael's Hospital. As we ascended the stairs to the third floor, the weight of the hospital's past seemed to hang over us like an invisible shroud. The old building groaned under its age, every step we took echoing in the dead silence. The further we went, the darker it felt, like we were crossing a boundary from the realm of the living to something else entirely. Zeus, still on edge, continued to pull away from the door that led into the psychiatric ward. I could feel his fear, something beyond his training, beyond the unknown threats he had faced in his career. Something about this place, the very essence of its decaying walls, seemed to have seeped into him. It wasn't just a dog's instinct. It was as if Zeus knew, in the deepest corners of his being, that there were forces here that defied the logical and the explainable. Forces that made every cell in his body scream run. "Zeus, it's okay," I said softly, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to keep it steady. I reached down to reassure him, but the moment my hand touched his fur, a low growl rumbled from his chest. This was more than fear. It was something primal. I pulled back, my mind racing. We had encountered strange situations before, but this was different. I looked over at Officer Williams, who was eyeing Rex warily. Rex had been trained for just about anything. Search and rescue, tracking suspects, even neutralizing threats. But now, here, in the shadow of this crumbling hospital, the Belgian Malinois was trembling. His eyes were wide with confusion, darting around the hallway, as if searching for an escape. "This isn't right," Williams muttered, his voice low. "These dogs don't act like this. Not unless." His words hung in the air, unfinished, as the silence around us grew thicker. The only sound was the faint, unsettling creak of the building's old infrastructure, as though it were alive and groaning under the weight of its history. And then, from the depths of the dark hallway, came a noise, soft, but unmistakable. It was a dragging sound, faint at first, then growing louder. Something, or someone, was moving through the halls. "Get the lights," I ordered, trying to maintain control. But the air felt suffocating, the shadows stretching farther than they should have. My flashlight beam was swallowed by the darkness ahead, and I felt the creeping sense of being watched. Officer Martinez, who had been at the front with the tactical team, radioed in. "Movement on the 3rd floor. This is not good. We need backup now." His voice was thick with urgency. The radio crackled again. "Control, K91. Be advised, we've got movement. We need all available units to the 3rd floor, now." I could feel the tension mounting in the pit of my stomach. What was it that had the dog so agitated? Whatever it wasn't something any of us were prepared for. I motioned for Williams to stay close as we moved cautiously down the hall, our eyes scanning every dark corner. Suddenly, Zeus stopped dead in his tracks, his entire body rigid. He was staring at something I couldn't see, but his gaze was fixed, his breathing shallow. "Zeus, what is it?" I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I saw it, barely visible at the end of the hallway, a faint light flickering. It wasn't from a flashlight. It wasn't from anything we had with us. It was a light that came from nowhere, casting long, twisted shadows against the peeling walls. My breath caught in my throat as I realized what we were dealing with. This place, it's not abandoned. There's something here. The moment the words left my mouth, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Steady, deliberate. My pulse quickened as we all froze, unsure of what to do next. The footsteps grew louder, more rapid, as if they were closing in on us. I motioned for the team to get into position, but before anyone could move, the unmistakable sound of furniture being dragged across the floor broke the silence. It was coming from the psychiatric ward. And it wasn't human. "Everyone, move back," I ordered, but it was too late. The radio buzzed with static, then Sergeant Miller's frantic voice broke through. Multiple figures, on the 3rd floor. We've got bodies. We need a crime scene unit. Now." My breath froze in my lungs as I looked at Williams. The air, once heavy with suspense, now felt cold, deadly cold. Whatever had been happening here, whatever twisted ceremony had been taking place, it was far worse than we could have ever imagined. We approached the psychiatric ward cautiously, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. What we found when we finally breached the door stopped us all in our tracks. The room had been transformed into something ritualistic. Hospital beds were arranged in tight circles, each one holding a body in varying stages of decomposition. There was no sign of struggle, just lifeless figures lying there, as though they had been abandoned in place, forgotten by time. Zeus, who had been hesitant from the beginning, was now stiff with a new kind of alertness, his hackles raised, his body trembling in disgust. It was as if even he understood that this wasn't just a crime scene. This was something far darker. And then, as we moved through the chaos of the room, my flashlight caught something else. Symbols. Elaborate, grotesque symbols painted on the walls. At first, I couldn't make sense of them, but the more I stared, the clearer it became. They were drawn in blood. Who would do this? I whispered, my voice shaking with disbelief. There were no answers, no explanations. Just the eerie, silent gaze of the bodies, staring out at us from the beds. The moment we discovered the gruesome truth, I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. This wasn't just a robbery. This wasn't just a missing persons case. What had been going on here was much, much worse. And just as we were about to make our next move, the radio crackled with another voice, an officer, frantic and breathless. "We've got more. We found tunnels beneath the building. They're leading to the maintenance rooms. It's worse than we thought." I looked at Zeus, who was still trembling. He had been the one to alert us, the one to sense the horror long before we did. Without him, I wasn't sure any of us would have made it out of St. Michael's alive. And that, I realized, was the true power of a K-9 officer. Not just to follow commands, not just to chase down suspects, but to sense the unexplainable, the unspeakable, and to keep us alive in the face of it all. The final reveal and unbelievable courage. The moments following the discovery felt like a dream, or perhaps, more accurately, a nightmare that wouldn't let us wake up. The hospital, which had once been a place of healing, had turned into a haunting testament to evil. As the investigation progressed, the full extent of what we had uncovered became more chilling with each passing hour. The bodies in the beds, the symbols on the walls, and the eerie stillness of the place made it clear that something truly wicked had taken place here. But the most unsettling part was the fact that Zeus and Rex, two highly trained K-9s, had somehow known long before we did. Their reactions were beyond instinct. They seemed to be warning us of something far more sinister than we were prepared to understand. As the team continued to secure the building and search for any remaining suspects, I couldn't shake the images of those bodies, of the abandoned patients who had been systematically targeted, left to perish in that cold, silent ward. It wasn't just the lives that had been lost that haunted me. It was the realization that this was only one of many secret horrors that had existed beneath the surface, hidden in the corners of this old hospital. Zeus, who had been trembling at the entrance, was now standing tall again, his focus unwavering as we navigated through the dark halls. He had saved us. His instincts had led us to the truth when no one else could have. But there was something more in his gaze, something that felt like a promise. A silent vow that no matter the cost, he would protect us, just as he had done time and time again. I could see the trust in his eyes, and in that moment, I understood the bond between a K-9 officer and their partner. It wasn't just about commands or training. It was about loyalty, a loyalty that transcended all human understanding. As the police units began to evacuate the area, the eerie silence of St. Michael's Hospital pressed in once again. The building, once a place filled with the sounds of life, was now a dark, oppressive tomb. But there was one thing that stuck with me as I stood with Zeus by my side. Our job wasn't just to chase down criminals or follow leads. It was to expose the darkness, to shine a light on the evil that tried to stay hidden in the shadows. In the days that followed, the full scope of what had transpired in that hospital came to light. The criminals who had used the facility for their own twisted purposes were arrested, their network dismantled. The missing patients were identified, and their families could finally find closure. But for me, the real story was the heroism of two dogs who had sensed the unexplainable, who had led us through the darkness when we were blind to the horrors around us. And as for Zeus, he had become more than just my partner. He was a reminder of the power of loyalty, of courage, and of the unseen bond that can form between humans and their K-9 companions, a bond that can change everything. The whispers of the past, the stories of hauntings and tragedies that had followed St. Michael's Hospital for decades, had finally been uncovered. But in the end, it wasn't just our training or our tactics that had made the difference. It was the simple, unwavering courage of a dog who had refused to back down when it mattered most. We left the hospital that night, but the memory of what we had uncovered stayed with me forever. It wasn't just the end of an investigation. It was the beginning of a new chapter for me and Zeus. A chapter where we both understood the deeper meaning of loyalty, of protection, and of the incredible power that can come from a bond built on trust and love. That night, I didn't just walk away with the answers we'd been searching for. I walked away knowing that, with Zeus by my side, there was nothing we couldn't face together. And whatever horrors awaited us in the future, we would face them, one step at a time, side by side, with unwavering courage. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.